he can't really say much. He started to cry. And the physician, that doctor, were there looking at the Ganden Rinpoche when he saw and heard from the news.
Is it possible to live on in your body after you've passed away?
After death, clinically dead, but still body remain very fresh.
He just have to come and see by himself to believe him. I studied as a Tibetan medical doctor, let alone going to a med school to study Western medicine. When we're clinically dead, within minutes to hours, to day, 2 weeks, the body will quite rapidly start to change, right? And we don't see any of those. Through the lens of Tibetan Buddhist practice, you go to an extent where your extremely subtle consciousness is there, and all of those sensory stimuli has been shut down. Movie Matrix, they used a similar metaphor where Neo will come and he experienced that, like the complete darkness, and then right after that he see everything so clear, right?
That's when people say, oh, I saw the light, when people have near-death experiences.
The clear light state is the 8 stages of dying.
What was sort of the reaction from these Western forensic scientists?
They were completely mind-bended.
Welcome to Bodja Podcast.
Dr. Thanamla, thank you so much for coming on the Bodja Podcast. How are you doing this afternoon?
Yeah, I'm doing well, Sidhu. Thanks so much for having me. It's a great pleasure for me.
Yeah, of course. No, thank you for coming on this podcast. It's gotten cold here in Virginia. I'm sure it's much colder in Minnesota. How's the weather there?
It's cold. Oh, it's really cold. I always felt like back there in DC or in Charlottesville, you don't get much snow, but looks like you had snow this past week. Over here is very deceiving. So I'm looking right here through my patio. It looks so nice outside, kind of a sunny and blue sky, but you go out and it's freezing cold.
Yeah.
It's so cold, yeah.
What's the temperature at the moment?
Oh man, so what's the temperature and how it feels, right? I think the temperature must be at least today in 30s, but then when you scroll down and it says how it feels like 18, I think. It's so below freezing.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Dr.
Thanamla,
for the audience who maybe don't know your background too much, maybe could you give a brief introduction on what do you do and why is it important?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So, my current position, I'm a Tibetan medicine doctor or Tibetan medical doctor and a medical anthropologist. But kind of go a little bit further back. I started as a Tibetan medical doctor. I went to Tibetan Medical and Astro College after my high school in India to study Tibetan medicine specifically. And I think I graduated sometime, I think in late 90s. So it was 98 when I graduated and did my internship in New Delhi. And at that time, in hindsight, I feel like I wasn't really aware of anything, the gravity of being a Tibetan doctor, really. It was really more of my kind of a second career plan when I was really intending to go study Western biomedicine. And during those times, it is really not that easy to let alone going to a med school, but really to find ways and resources to get into medical school to study Western medicine. And so with support of my friends and of course at the Tibetan Medical Institute at that time, students were supported by Tibetan Medical Institute and also, of course with the support of His Holiness's Ganden Podang office. And I got into Tibetan medicine school, and when I graduated, I just felt like, oh, now I'm done. I can just go out and practice and be a Tibetan medicine doctor. Little do I know at that time that as I started to engage with other medical experts and practitioners, I realized that this is such a deep and profound medical system that we could do so much more than just being able to sit in a clinic and see patients. And so that really escalated into the few instances that happened and helped me to reach out to people and study kind of a more systematic understanding of Western research, how to look at Tibetan medicine in the greater context of integrative and kind of a complementary medicine. And so that really pushed me to get through the Tibetan medical practice and made a decision to come to the US and go to school here. And it's a completely different story. I mean, it would be a long story to talk about how I ended up spending a huge chunk of my time getting through my undergrad and then through the graduate school. But eventually I finished my graduate school in medical anthropology. And so currently, as I said from the outset, as a Tibetan medical doctor and a medical anthropologist, we have a program here at the University of Minnesota called Tibetan Healing Initiative. And so I run the program, but also we offer courses and conduct research and engage with the local community here. So this is a kind of a nutshell of what I do and how I got here.
Yeah, and then I definitely want to dive deeper into all of those. But so for the center, what's sort of the focus of the research?
Yeah, this is a great question, Sirup. There's so much to do, right? I mean, sometimes we feel like there's so much potential, and but what are the core things that we can contribute to the existing healthcare practice, existing research, focus on not just on the Western medical approach to health and well-being, but also looking at from the more sort of a niche that we can create, which is more integrative, whole person health. And so initially when I started to work here at the University of Minnesota, we designed a study to design, develop, and validate an individual constitutional assessment tool that really helped us to build that model to help people to look at how you can identify yourself, what's your inherent strengths and weaknesses. And we had a great team of interdisciplinary healthcare professionals and researchers, and we did that. And as we started to work on our Tibetan Healing Initiative program here at the Center for Spirituality and Healing, we realized that one thing that we can really contribute is the mind-body health paradigm. And which is really because, as we all know, Tibetan medicine essentially is so strongly informed by Buddhist philosophy and psychology. There's so much that we can interject into not only the Tibetan medical research, but also from the lens of integrative health and whole person health. So most of our work is really focused on that. And so two projects that we are really working on right now is looking at how we can improve the way we care for dying people. That's the one thing. And under the umbrella of that end-of-life care, we also have a Tukdam research project that I think now most of us are really having more and more access and resources to understand more about Tukdam practice in Tibetan Buddhist culture. The other thing is really to look at the neurodegenerative diseases or the neurodegenerative conditions that comes up when people start to age. And so we're looking at people who are in the age of 70s or 80s, or some people who live longer than that. And we are making sure that we go to the community where we can get the best data and best sample. And hence we formed a interdisciplinary team, and we had a great privilege to collaborate with monastic communities in India and some of the leading research institutions in India. And so currently we are working on we call the project as Lama study. So Lama means, yeah, it's a sort of playing with the word a little bit here, but it's an acronym. We really want to make sure that whatever research that we are doing, we collaborate with the local partners, but also once we do the study, we find ways to translate that into the local community and health. and so that we can bring it to, for instance, here in the US, and we can incorporate that into the way we care for aging community here in the US itself.
For those who don't know, what does a medical anthropologist mean?
Oh, that's a great question, Siddha.
Because it's like, so many different, I feel like, anthropology itself, it's like hard to describe, right? But then you put that medical aspect onto it as well, then it's
Yeah,
like,
I know. It's so you asked a great question, Siddha, because when I came here to the US in 2009 and 10, I had no clue about anthropology. I've heard bits and pieces of it when I first had a chance to go for this conference in Oxford in England. I remember it was a International Association of Tibetan Studies, I think, IATS. And there were a few researchers, non-Tibetan, who were doing study on Tibetan uh, knowledge and wisdom. And some of them were focused on medicine, and they would say medical anthropology and anthropology. I had no clue. And then when I came to the US, I remember taking those courses in undergrad. And one of the courses that I need to take was Intro to Anthropology to fulfill the social science requirement. And it just sort of blew me away because in Tibetan medicine or Tibetan Buddhist contemplative science and practice, we the emphasis is so much on look at the holistic approach, right? And in anthropology, they use the same sort of a lens. So as most of the people, or maybe most of the people are not aware, so anthropology literally means the study of human. So it's a Latin word, anthro, meaning human, and logy means it's a study or a science. And so when we study human through the lens of anthropology, we use four key components. So which would be archaeology is under the umbrella of anthropology, archaeology is one field, right? And then we go into social cultural anthropology. Social cultural anthropology encompasses everything that human or yeah, we could say human being, but these days now we also bring in non-human or animals into it. And so anything that we human do in order to survive, sustain, and flourish. And so medicine comes under that umbrella. And then we have the third one, which is really more linguistic anthropology. And so we look at symbols, which includes language as well. And then the fourth one is we basically look at the biological anthropology. We look at how we got here, where did we come from, and so we look at the very kind of a nitty gritty of some human biological remains that we could find. And so these are the four sort of a subfields, and under the social cultural anthropology, that's where the medicine come into. And medical anthropology basically means a cross-cultural study of medicine. And so most of the time people in medicine don't necessarily like medical anthropologists because we always critique what's going on. So whether it's in the field of Western biomedicine or even in non-Western biomedicine like Tibetan medicine or Chinese or Ayurveda or Unani medicine, you sort of look at it from the critical lens. And so my work is really looking at, I'm coming from the field of end-of-life care where I look at how we care for people with terminal illnesses or people who are dying, not only through the lens of Western biomedicine, but also I bring in the Tibetan medical approach. Then I bring in the Buddhist contemplative approach into it. And so even though there are all these other different non-mainstream systems like Ayurveda or Chinese or Unani medicine, my focus is very much through the lens of Tibetan medicine. And so there's a long-winded response to your question of what is medical anthropology.
Now I know, so that's good.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned Tukdam. What is Tukdam?
So there's a different levels of articulating what is Tukdam, right? So I'm sure you have heard about Tukdam, you have some understanding of what is Tukdam, and most of your listeners either have heard about it or might not have much understanding of what is Tukdam. And so Tukdam literally, I mean, in a lay people term, if we try to break it down, this two syllable of Tuk and Tham, Tuk generally means consciousness or mind, right? Mm-hmm. And so, but when we contextualize this particular mind or consciousness with regard to Tukdam, then we are looking at extremely subtle mind or consciousness, right? And so not the consciousness that you and I have right now, which is very much governed by our five faculty or five senses, right? And so as we are talking, I'm also sort of constantly bombarded by everything that is in my vicinity. And so I sort of get a little bit of feedback as I talk to you because I hear my voice a little bit, but I also see things here and I smell things. But when you go to this extremely subtle consciousness, all of those sensory stimuli has been deemed and those has been shut down. The Tham means to sort of embrace it and to hold on to it. And so
like
Tukdam,
like
exactly, yeah.
Tambo, okay.
Yeah, Tambo. So when you are sort of going through the stages of dying, and then especially through the lens of Tibetan Buddhist practice, you go to an extent where your extremely subtle consciousness is there, and you kind of hold on to that. So this is a very lay person's way of explaining it. But then if you go a little bit on the higher level, then it has a completely different meaning, right? And so Tuk means having that subtle consciousness, then you can use a particular anchor or a reference to write on, right? And so for instance, if I have a very close association or connection with my root teacher, so for almost all the Tibetans, when we're close to dying, we want to listen to His Holiness the Dalai Lama's teaching, his words. But also sometimes when you bring it a little closer, then you would have your own personal tutor or teacher. Then we might have parents or family members or friends. And so you use that when you are in extremely subtle consciousness. And Tham means also could be said Thamzik. Thamzik means, that again, that very close bonding that one has developed. And so sometimes when someone is in state of that extremely subtle consciousness where you are completely driven by non-divided attention, right? Completely focused, because now my whole sensory faculty has sort of diminished or suspended. And so I don't have to hear anything. I don't have to see this beautiful deep blue sky and all the white snow that I could see through the patio. Or I can just look at my own self, like at the camera, and I'm seeing how I'm talking and how I appear out there. So my whole focus is so much on one particular thing, which is on the teachings and words of my root Lama, His Holiness Dalai Lama's teaching. So that's really important to have that. Now, if you get to the highest level, then someone who is in the state of that mind or that subtle consciousness, then you contemplate, then you meditate on the state of Toni. So Toni means emptiness. So emptiness is loosely translated as, these days we use a term like interdependent nature, dependent origination. In Tibetan we use that. And so you already are in touch with your root teacher. So whether it being His Holiness the Dalai Lama, whether it being your personal tutor, your teacher, or someone who's so close to you, and you're already in touch with that, and therefore you feel secure, you feel very kind of grounded, and your heart power. Most of these practitioners that I go to talk to, they will use the term like Nyingdop. So Nyingdop is really loosely translated as heart power, but it's a confidence that is rooted in deep level of devotion and connection to all the sentient beings, including yourself and your teachers, right? And then you contemplate and meditate on Toni. and interdependent nature. And that focus and deep meditation on interdependent nature sort of really liberates you further from one who's already being liberated to some extent compared to people like me or all the people who haven't had that sort of a practice, right? And so that's the highest level of how we articulate Tukdam. And therefore, whether someone is simulating, whether someone is sort of engaging in Tukdam practice while alive, they would present a uh, very different presentation. Or someone is close to dying, then they will completely uh, sort of protect their body and delay any level of changes that would happen when someone is clinically dead. And so again, so again, we can talk a lot about what is Tukdam and the mechanism, but this is what's really happening and sort of a function and the cultural reference of Tukdam.
So, Doctor, so the Tukdam, one Tukdam is the type of Tukdam that maybe some people understand or know, which is when you're, in the dying process, you preserve your body and then you meditate on, emptiness, or the clear light is maybe a term they
Yeah,
use.
yeah,
But then second one is even when you're maybe not in, well, we're all in the dying process, but not that close. Like let's say like our age or someone relatively healthy, you can practice undergo the Tukdam practice. Is that correct? Or or just is Tukdam just a like a method, or like saying that it's a just Tukdam is
yeah.
basically saying we're meditating on emptiness. Is that what Tukdam means?
Yeah, so yeah, Tsirup, this is again, it's such an important question because sometimes there were times like even like 10 or 15 years ago, I remember hardly anyone knows about Tukdam. When I first was introduced to this particular case or a particular senior monk who were in the state of Tukdam, and we were told to go and collect data, I really had no clue. And I was, in fact, quite skeptical about what's happening. I was just like, I could have, I could do a lot of other things instead of being there for almost 2 weeks and collecting data. And over the course of time, we started to know more and more about Tukdam. The problem is sometimes when we have more access to very sort of not only sacred but also secret Buddhist tantric practice, it's it's easy to be misinformed to some extent because not everyone will have an opportunity or access to those information, particularly coming through the practitioners themselves, not only from the Buddhist text. And so therefore, someone who really want to engage in Tukdam practice at the highest level that I explained earlier, then it will involve a lifetime of training and practice. And so, because I usually tell my friends or people when I present my work, is that uh, Tibetan medicine actually very much came out of the tantric practice of Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist psychology. Because one of the things that in Tibetan medicine, which is so fascinating, Sidhu, is when we look at the embryology, because Tibetan medicine can be traced to almost 2,600 years ago, right? So during the time when there was no devices that we can look into the mother's womb and see what is happening, how the fetus is developing week to week basis. But around that time, if you look into the Tibetan medical text, from the first day to the day when the baby will be born, everything is explained to the minute details. And how does people know about it? And so it came from the Tantra practice where they have to visualize, where they have to have this very nuanced understanding of what's happening in the mother's womb. And so hence, for tantric practitioners, since when they're dying, the body is slowly degenerating, right? And the body is getting to a stage where it's sort of consciousness is leaving the body. So they need to very much understand the details of how actually the human is being formed. And so when a mother conceived a baby, it has to have the subtlest form of energy from mother and father and the subtlest consciousness. And once you have that understanding, then when we are dying, then it sort of disintegrates. And so one need to know about that. And so therefore, someone to stay in the highest level of Tukdam, you need to have this deep level of understanding of how the body is being formed and how it develops when we are born. And then when we are dying, how it slowly disintegrates. And then, as you said earlier, it's sort of like the clay light state is the eighth stage of stages of dying. So there's 8 different stages of dying. But for general...
Could you walk us through the 8 stages, like maybe briefly?
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, sure. I'll try to be brief. I realize that sometimes I get too wordy because I'm always so passionate and fascinated by stuff. Yeah. So the thing is, so usually I need to contextualize here a little bit, and both in Tibetan medicine and Buddhist tantric practice, we say that the source of our body is 5 elements. Mm-hmm. And so 5 elements are earth, water, fire, air, and space. So they are 5 sources. And so when we are conceived in mother's womb, in Tibetan, we also use the term like karmar. So the white and red essence. Oh, yeah. So the white essence is the semen that we receive from our father, and the red essence is the egg or an ovum that we receive from our mother. Then it has to be supplemented by the subtle consciousness, right? So when we are dying, first thing that start to slowly degenerate is the 5 elements. So it starts from earth elements, gradually sort of degenerates. And then as earth degenerates, there are sudden external and internal manifestations. And so the external is we see in the body. And so for a physician, caregiver, and for our great practitioners, practitioner would see themselves, what is happening in the body, right? And so our muscles will slowly start to break down. We feel like, our limbs are getting, sometimes it might not show it that way, but the person would feel like our limbs are getting thinner and thinner. Right. And the internal signs are there that you are slowly sort of getting drowned into the ground or earth. Mm-hmm. And then as the earth degenerates, and then the next element is the water element. The water element would become more pronounced. So the water elements, as it's starting to degenerate, the dryness of skin will increase. The person would feel like there's a sudden level of it's almost like you can hear the noises from your joints, even when you are not moving. And so that's a personal way of understanding changes that's happening. And I think the sensory faculty is also so key. When earth element is slowly diminishing, the person start to see less. And so everything becomes a little fuzzy. When
the
water
earth element is already degenerating then from too much on the screen. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know. It's so that's also really interesting because sometimes when this is an aside a little bit, but when we look at screen or when we look at any sort of images that will push in lots of lights in our eyes, that's when our eyesight, because it just consumes all those lights in our brain, right? And sometimes our eyesight will give a pushback to us, like, okay, I can't take it any longer. And so when we are slowly dying, that's the same thing happening because it's too much for our brain to take in all those lights. And the earth element is slowly degenerating. It started to see things a little more opaque or fuzzy. And then as the water element started to diminish, the sense of smell would start to diminish also. So there's a second stage. And then, of course, as I said before, the dryness will come in. And then the fire element will start to diminish. We started to lose, we feel more coldness and started to lose a little bit of heat. Or sometimes there's a poor maintenance of heat across the body. And so it feels like on the chest region, you feel like are really hot. And then all the extremities, all your hands and legs would started to feel a lot colder. And as that thing happened, we started to lose our taste a little bit. And then fire, and then the air, and that's the 4th stage, right? And then at earth, water, fire, and air stage, then our breathing will start to change. We will start having shallower breathe and deep breathe faster. Uh, and it's the interesting thing is also as the air element is diminishing, we also started to feel less of tactile. So you don't feel much of a touch. And so even if someone is trying to sort of caress you and touch you and give you some form of affection, the person might not experience anything. And then eventually, as the air element dissolves into the space, that's when the clinical death will occur. And so the person will have a rattling breath, and then the breathing will cease to be there. And it goes into the space. And then the fifth stage is, we usually say, first is the Kalamba. Kalamba means the whole white stage, where basically there's a certain level of push of from there's a descending. So from our chakra to the heart region, Kamkarpo, or the white essence, will slowly start to descend down toward the heart chakra.
That's in tantra. That's a good thing, though. That's what you want, right? Like when you
Exactly.
practice. Okay, so it's a good thing.
Yeah, but it will occur to everyone. That's what it's being presented in the tantric practice. But most of the times we won't be aware of that, right? Because there will be lots of other things happening. I mean, being hallucinated, and you feel like you see so many people wearing white clothes. Some of them might look like deceased family members or your close friends. Actually, what really is happening is our white essence is slowly descending toward the heart chakra, right? And if we are aware of that, if we have been prepared enough and have read the Pardo Turtle or Tibetan Book of the Dead, then we know that, okay, this is more of an hallucination. Actually, what's happening is really Kam Karbo, or the white essence, is gradually descending. And so it could be confused with some sort of a hallucinated image that one might see, right? And in the same way, yeah,
No, so that maybe that's what when people say, "Oh, I saw the light," when they've
yeah,
like people have near death experiences, people say, "Oh, I saw the light." Could it be that hallucination?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so NDE, or near-death experience, is quite different. So there are a lot of studies out there, and with the near-death experience, the way our cardiopulmonary and our central nervous system, which is our brain, starts to cease to function, is quite different compared to when we are actually dying and clinically dead, right? When we're clinically dead, then the function of our heart and lungs, cardiopulmonary, there's nothing, right? It is all zipped off. And then the fact that there's no blood supply or oxygen to our brain, it starts to really get to a point where it slowly shuts down everything. And then in the end, it will give that last push to the brain. And for the near-death experience people, or the person, they might not experience exactly the same thing. So for them, they might be able to see like a white image or a white sort of a vision right away, and then they come back sometimes. So for someone who is really, if I'm actively dying, then the way I experience will be quite different. And so when I experience the white state, then when Buddhist lay people's term, we use the term like Karlampa, so the path toward the whiteness, right? And then it is followed by Marlampa. It's like the ascending of the mother's ovum or egg. Oh, it's in the blood, in the red form, and it's slowly or gradually supposed to ascend toward the heart chakra. But then again, for usual or the normal process of dying, it happens so fast, and then you see almost like the autumn sky when the autumn sunset, when you see this really beautiful sort of a red orange color, a deep horizon. But then again, if you are not aware of that and if you are not prepared, we might see like lots of dreadful and scary looking. Someone has all the fire and they're just there to sort of take you in, and so people will start to get really scared. But those who are practitioners and those who have on a regular basis read the Pardo Toitel or Tibetan Book of the Dead and have managed to sort of visualize and embody them into their practice, then they have a completely different experience, right? So that's a Kalamba. And then when both the white and red essence reunites at our heart chakra, that's when the Naklamba. Naklamba means a pitch dark experience where you feel like it's completely shut down. And I think you have watched the movie Matrix, the first one. They use a similar metaphor where Neo will come and he experienced that, like the complete darkness, and then right after that he see everything so clear, right? And after the Naklamba or the pitch dark phase, then it's a clear light state. Then it's a chive yourself. So when you get into chive yourself, then as the practitioner or the text will say is you get to a state where everything is at the most basic level, which is like everything is there and there's no any other there's no any other connotation conditioned by our own narrative or cultural context. And so everything is as it is. And if one is able to continue their focus on emptiness or toni, then it's just toni. So toni is really being able to understand that the very existence of my being here, even though I'm only in the sort of formless form. And so there's no any body, but there's only extremely subtle consciousness. And you use that and you understand the gravity or the importance of all other things, including all the teachers and sentient beings and family members who have worked together for me being in this state. And so the practitioner will continue to meditate on toni, and that's the moment that someone can liberate from the sort of a self-centered attitude, which would be dangzi, right? And so I guess as I caution this different philosophical concept and psychological overview of how things are working, I really feel like, the liberation is one thing and enlightenment is one thing, right? So when you are able to continue such kind of a meditation practice, you are working toward liberating yourself or your self-centered attitude. And as one is able to continue to be in that state of being, then there's a chance of getting into the state of nirvana, which is almost sangheva. So everything becomes exponentially clearer, right? So sang is really like not just awake. Sangheva means like fully awake, right? Fully cognizant of the cause and conditions of everything that we experience, whether it being a sense of well-being and happiness or a sense of deep suffering.
So everyone goes through those 8 stages, even the clear light stage, correct? Everyone goes through it. But the Tukdam practitioners, or the people, the practitioners who are in the Tukdam state, they're holding on to that clear light, or they're in that meditative clear light state. Is that what that is?
Yeah, I think so. Technically, that's how I understand in a correct way. But if we have this conversation with some high level adept practitioners, they might say, "Oh, you guys might be using the term not fully correctly," because those advanced practitioners might not use the term simdeva or tambuchini, like firmly grasping that subtle consciousness. Then it itself form a certain level of attachment, right? And so it's really like letting itself being there once you identify the nature. So I think we need to make that uh, subtle distinction between being there, understanding it, and being able to use that to continue your meditation.
Yes, of course. The way that we're using these words, they have a lot of in-depth connotation and meaning to it. So it's good to be careful not to
Yeah,
use these words black and white, especially these like grasping and attachment and all of this has a lot of connotation around it. Um, but
I know.
from the biological and physiological aspect, I remember seeing a paper that you and many through collaborations, many others published last July 2024, and I think it was one of the first peer-reviewed Tukdam papers, if I'm not mistaken. And there was also you guys had like in-depth measurements, taking pictures as well as skin coloration
Right.
and all. So from the physiological and biological aspect, what is happening when the practitioners are in the tuktam state? Well, what are you seeing, or what are you not seeing?
Yeah. No, this is really critical when we try to do, or when you try to study a cultural practice or a phenomenon like Tukdam through Western scientific approach, because everything boils down to what are things that we can measure and that we can analyze and present it to a very kind of a secular minded community. And so for us, that paper wasn't actually the first one. There were one paper which was published prior to that, and we just really to that paper just literally said that we didn't find anything because yeah, absolutely. When the study was initially started in way back in 2007 and 8, the whole focus was on trying to see what's happening in the brain, right? Because someone is clinically dead, but it doesn't show any signs of a person who is dead, and they within minutes to hours to day to weeks, the body will quite rapidly start to change, right? And we don't see any of those. And so what we tried to do initially was hook up the practitioner with all the electrodes. So EEG, we try to see what's happening in the brain. We use the thermal camera to measure the core body temperature. We also use EKG to see if there's anything happening in the heart. And we didn't find anything except for realizing that the body is able to retain the heat. And so the paper which came out after many years was to say that it's a nullified study, which is that we didn't see anything. I think you were just about to ask something, Thiru.
No, no, I was going to say, so the only thing you guys found was that the core body temperature was retained to a certain extent. Is that it?
At that time, yeah, at that time. And so again, I mean, there's a question because, right, the most of the and that particular first senior Buddhist teacher that we studied was in Monkot, and it's a tropical region. It was in September, October, really hot, and so the ambient temperature might have effect on the body temperature when we're measuring the core body temperature. And so there's a little bit of scientific critical questions that have arisen. Then the last paper that came out in 2024, it was all really trying to then our focus shifted from just looking at the central nervous system or brain function to the physiological changes that's happening, right? And so therefore, in addition to the interdisciplinary researchers and across the country, we also brought in what we say is the forensic scientists. So forensic scientists usually would look at thousands of dead body, right, to study what's happening when someone is clinically dead. And so we were trying to look at as body start to change right after someone is clinically dead, we would see from completely cooling down of body temperature to stiffening of the body, which we call rigor mortis, to changing of the body color, which is alaric mortis, to putrefaction, decomposition. So those are the things which happens from the first hour to next 3 to 4 days, and then slowly the body would really start to leak the fluid, and then it will just eat up itself. But in the cases that we have studied, we don't see any of those things. And so what we did was we tried to look at, okay, why it's not happening. So there's a $1 million question that you asked earlier, right? Why such things are happening. And then the two cases that we presented in that paper was really to show that when someone is in this kind of a meditative practice, it bypasses all of those changes in the first 2 or 3 days, or first 24 to 72 hours, but also it delays any putrefaction changes that will happen in weeks to come. And so those are, we see right there. And then for practitioners and for Tibetan researchers, we have some understanding that, okay, there's something happening in the body, which is out of reach of the Western medical research devices that we have. And so we are, again, as I alluded to earlier, these practitioners would really work on extremely subtle consciousness, which is way different or distinct from what we understand through the modern neuroscience. We look at the central nervous system or the peripheral nervous system. So we look at the brain and we look at the different parts of our body where there are all these nerves are there. When someone's in Tukdam, they intentionally, or when we are dying, then they, not really intentionally, but they understand that the body is completely shutting down, and they use that to bring in the extremely subtle consciousness to work on the body. So that's this kind of a very sort of a well-informed hypothesis, because these practitioners understand and they train themselves to be in this state. But from the Western researcher perspective, we need to see, we need to measure, and we need to analyze it. So it's a very difficult project there.
What did the forensic scientists say when they were there and measuring? And because one of the, I guess I don't know how to say respectfully, but like the subjects or the cases, they were in the Tukdam state post-mortem for 36 days is one of the pictures I saw. So what was sort of the reaction from these Western forensic scientists?
Yeah, they were completely mind-bended, so they were not only, very quickly, some of the researchers, they have some familiarity with Buddhist practice and how some of these meditative practices really go so deep that it gets really metaphysical. But there are some researchers who really don't have much understanding or background in Buddhist practice. And for them, it starts from being a little skeptical to not fully agreeing. And then they quickly turn into being completely taken over. And I remember some of those meetings that we had, they would get emotional, and some of them really would choke up. Yeah, absolutely. They would choke up, sort of trying to articulate what they are seeing, because the data is already there. So when we were working on the manuscript, we have to discuss and we have to talk about this data. And there's like, how is this happening? And yeah.
Well, why do you think they were choking up? Is it just because it's a paradigm shift for them, or is it just a sense of awe, or what?
Yeah. It's a deep sense of awe, and also it's. Most of the hardcore scientists, when they weigh the head of scientists, they have a very sort of how do you say, like hard scientist mentality, that anything that you can see, measure, and analyze or work on, that's what I believe in, and otherwise I don't have anything beyond that. And then when they take off their scientists had, and then there's just a regular person who some people have lost their family members or close people, or someone had some cultural background of there could be something else happening when someone is dying, and it's almost like they get verified by something that is completely not in their realm of education or scientific training. And so they get really emotionally taken over. And if I can share a very quick story here, Sidhu, is one of the other papers that I sent to you when
Pema.
the 100th Ganden Tipa was in the state of Tukdam meditation. And I sort of shared that in that paper, saying a physician and his team from hospital in Belgaum. So Belgaum is a Indian city nearby Hooghly, right? And so they have this large hospital, and the Ganden Rinpoche died at that hospital, and he was the one who signed the death certificate. And so when his team came to have a blessing of Ganden Rinpoche, who was in the state of Tukdam, I think it was on 14th or 13th day, and he came, and there were so many people, most of them in addition to Tibetans, but there were a lot of Indian local people who came to seek blessing from the monk who was in that meditative state. And the physician, that doctor, were there looking at the Ganden Rinpoche, and then he didn't say much at all in few minutes that we were there together. And then we went to this another room, and we were to have a tea and just talk over. And he can't really say much. He started to cry, and he was just so taken over. And he said that in his culture, he have heard about such things, but he never thought that in his lifetime he would witness someone living the stories that I have heard from his elders and from his culture. And so I think he's someone who initially, when he saw and heard from the news that the monk who died in his presence is still able to keep his body intact, he just have to come and see by himself to believe in it. And he came and he saw, and he was just like completely taken over by that particular moment. And so, yeah, it happens all the time. And these forensic scientists, when they first came on board, not all of them, but a couple of them were not too sure about what's happening and what they were getting into. But for their scientific curiosity, they wanted to be part of the project. And yeah, so ongoing research, which I'm not directly associated with, but there are study going on at the monasteries and the University of Wisconsin medicine researchers and folks in Russia. They're continuing to study the physiological changes that's happening, and then perhaps maybe down the road we can get some more sort of a dry body tissue that could be analyzed in the lab and have a better understanding.
Got it. So like
Yeah.
taking off a part of the body tissue.
Yeah,
Okay.
body, but in a very of course you need to get a consent from the attendants and other people, but take a tissue in a sudden way that it doesn't cause any erosion to the meditative monk or practitioner at that time.
Right. I think Geshe, I think one of the papers that you sent me, you talked about the story about this girl named Pema. I thought you were going to bring up that story.
I see.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Could you quickly tell that story? I know we only have a few minutes, but it was a very interesting story.
Yeah, that's a different way of looking at mind or consciousness when someone is closely dying through the lens of Tibetan Buddhist or medical perspective, right? And so this particular person whose name has been changed to keep the anonymity of the person, and so I call the person Pema, and she had a condition where her brain has completely been shut down. And so she was initially in a vegetative state. And when she was brought to the ICU in Indian hospital, the attending neurologist thought that there's no way that she would come back to life. There's no way that she can sustain the next few days, let alone coming back to life and being able to recover, right? And so when the patient's parents reached out to me because I was finishing my field work in Monkot at that time, so I went to see Pema, and the family members were there, and there was nothing going on. All the monitor that is connected to her to look at her brain function, how her heart and lungs are functioning. There's barely anything happening. But then suddenly, there were Tibetan physicians that they have requested to come earlier, and then I went. And one thing that we saw is there's a certain level of in Tibetan medicine or Buddhist practice we say energy, and so inner heat was there, and of course the family members were very worried, and they want to do anything, and they want to keep her as long as they could. So I had it was really fortunate for us because the attending neurologists were very open. And so when I spoke to him, and I remember I had to give him a call because he was not at the hospital when we were there. And I called him up and I said, like, hey, I know what you are thinking because that's what we saw on the report. But can we wait for a week or 10 days and see how she is doing? And he came on board right away. He said, okay, let's do it. And then we started to do few of the things. I mean, we didn't do anything other than what the hospital staff were doing at that time. But what we tried was the family members to be there to engage with Pema on a regular basis and just to interact with her in a way that at least if there's any hope, if there's any energy in her body, she can use that to sustain and then to use that to recover herself. And I remember after a week, the neurologist called me and he was just so excited. He was just like, this is a miracle, this is a miracle. And I remember I said, like, what happened? She's back. And so I think we really looked at that time was we were looking at the subtle consciousness. We were not looking at the consciousness which the Western biomedicine look at, which is the function of brain. So in the Western biomedicine, the mind emerged out of our brain. And so the brain and the consciousness of mind is used quite synonymously. They almost see it as the same. On the other hand, in Tibetan medicine or Buddhist practice, we see brain as the executive function. We see brain as the one that controls our sensory perceptions or sensory functions. And then we see mind as the one that really sort of maneuver or manipulate that central nervous system function. And so the fact that we were able to see that, oh, maybe there's something happening with this extremely subtle consciousness that we talked about for Tukdam practitioners, and maybe voluntary or involuntarily, it's there, and it's for our family members to sort of try to reaffirm and reinforce the Pema's engagement with that subtle consciousness. And so she was able to recover, and then she went through courses of Tibetan medicine, therapy, and other practices, especially physio and stuff. And now I heard that she's doing quite well. It's almost like 6 years now.
Wow, that's amazing. The doctors at the time, there was damage to the cortex of the brain, right? So it's just like the executive function, the thinking side, the consciousness side, and she was basically declared brain dead. But then I think one thing that was mentioned in the study was that just through even engaging, or the parents engaging with her, there was tears in her eyes, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you picked that up picked that up well. Yeah, it was. So sometimes, yeah, I mean, sometimes people might unnecessarily prolong someone's life. That's why when we engaged with the neurologist and the surgeon, we say like, okay, how about we we can borrow 10 more days, and we want to see how we're able to do that. And sometimes if there's no any change at all and it's completely in a vegetative state, then there's no much use in prolonging someone's last stages of life. But if we see that there's a certain level of inner subtle consciousness, or we say nangitu, or internal energy, then it's really important how best we want to use them. And as you alluded to earlier, she was suddenly sort of responding, and uh, the way she was responding by tearing up and being able to show her emotion or respond through her emotion was one of the cues that was quite critical for family members and us.
Wow, that's amazing. And
Yeah,
it's the engagement, it was the love and the warmth of the family that also helped her to recover.
so critical. Yeah, so critical. I mean, someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama would always emphasize the importance of safeguarding and working with our heart, not only with our mind, right? And so that's why, like, when we do all this study out there in the community, in Tibetan community, and especially when someone is at the most vulnerable stage of life when they're dying, right? And so it's not only someone who's dying, but also people who are around someone who's dying. The family members also becomes quite vulnerable. I mean, they suddenly are able to pick up certain things that will strengthen their resilience. But at those times, Nyingtok, or the safeguarding heart, and sort of pushing more energy into someone's heart is just so key. And we see it over and over again that reasoning is important, but being with the heart and facilitating someone to have a stronger heart or Nyingtok really make a huge difference. How someone can recover, or how someone can die. Even if someone is dying, they can die with certain level of confidence and secureness.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
Dr. La, we didn't get to like any of your background and all of that. You know, you've done so much for our Tibetan community. From I saw that you were one of the prominent speakers for HIV initially for our community, and you've done so much. I guess on this adventure, looking back, what's been one of the most favorable moments, or what do you make of this adventure so far? Because and also your journey, we talked about earlier. You came to the U.S. You started undergrad when you were like about 30, something like that, and you had to
yeah.
work your way through these difficulties. What do you make of this adventure?
Yeah, I think thanks for looking into this information and sort of letting me relive those experiences. It's been quite a while since we did the HIV work for our community, and we did few other projects. And one thing that I always tell my friends or people who ask me a similar question is there's a great level of satisfaction and benefit, I would say, if there's an opportunity to do things for others. I've always told people that everything that I have gotten so far, I feel so privileged, because being able to go to med school in India to study Tibetan medicine, and having a chance to help people and earn merit for myself while doing so, and then coming to the US, and all through my undergrad to graduate work, having a full scholarship. And I always feel like sometimes when we are trying to do things for others and for community, you feel like, oh, you are spending all this time and resources for others, and I'm not really looking for myself. But sooner or later, things will come back right to you. And all these opportunities I've received, everything that I've been able to experience, I really think that it's all due to whatever little things I've done for my community. It's just like if I've done let's say on a percentage level, if I've done 10% of work for others, I've received like almost 100% back to me. So that's the one thing. The other thing really, it's sort of, I would like to share with younger people or my friends is whenever you do any project, whenever you come up with something, I think the intention is so important. Going back to school when I was in 30s, right, and going to a graduate school when I could have been doing some other things and having a little bit more relaxing life. Why I was able to do that was really the whole intention was other focused. I really didn't think that, okay, if I go to school and get the PhD degree and I can earn fame and money and stuff, then I don't think I can have the same level of resiliency. And so I think the fact that the focus was very much on others and try to do those things for our community really helped me to be resilient and be persistent in what I wanted to do. And so I think those are the things I really feel like I'm so fortunate to be in a situation that I'm able to do and continue to do so. I think that's a great help.
Wow, that's such a great insight. Focusing on others, caring, and having compassion for others helps your own resiliency and your own inner strength. The nyingdo that you've been mentioning.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then I guess the last thing is, what are you looking forward to? Well, what I guess continues to give you meaning, purpose, and even excitement?
Yeah, if I say in few words, it's really to pave a path for people who are showing lots of promise, people who wanted to do things, primarily focused on our Tibetan youngsters, up and coming leaders, scholars, researchers. Really, I mean, the thing that we're doing at the University of Minnesota is really a tip of the iceberg. And I think down the road in years to come, 5 or 10 years to come, more Tibetan scholars or researchers can use these platforms that we are working on creating at the university level. The other thing is really through, I mean, of course, the primary focus is on Tibetan youngsters, but also to bring in non-Tibetan researchers and scholars to have an opportunity to access Tibetan cultural knowledge and practices and be an equal part of what we have started to do here at the University of Minnesota. So I'm quite optimistic about that.
Well, I'm glad. And, as representing the young people, I'm truly grateful for the work that you're doing and paving the road forward for us. Thank you so much, Gela. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it, Siddharth. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you.